Tyrion the prisoner pontificates on what unites people. Armies, gold, flags, vandalized beloved franchises. Nothing is more powerful than a disappointed fan base. Nothing can stop it. Nothing can defeat it.
Nerderotic.com.
Irony, a literary technique originally used in Greek tragedy, by which the full significance of a character's words or actions are clear to the audience or reader, although unknown to the character. Crap, something of extremely poor quality. Bitter, angry, hurt, or resentful because of one's bad experiences or a sense of unjust treatment. George R.R. Martin's 2001 loss to J.K. Rowling is still a sore subject, 13 years after George R.R. Martin's A Storm of Swords lost to J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire for Best Novel in the 2001 Hugo Awards. Martin fans, and perhaps Martin himself, are still bitter. An old quote from Martin regarding the loss that appeared on a fan site recently went crazy on Reddit. "Eat your heart out, Rowling," Martin wrote. "Maybe you have billions of dollars in my Hugo, but you don't have readers like these." In 2012, Martin, author of the A Song of Ice and Fire series, adapted for HBO as Game of Thrones, elaborated on his feelings. "I wish I'd have beaten her. What can I say? I would have liked to have won that award, and I don't think Rowling cares much about it," Martin told the blog Audria's News, "and she didn't send anyone to accept the award, which is certainly annoying." You know what's annoying? Somebody not finishing their story. Say what you want about crazy J.K. Rowling. She's so rich, she thinks she can change the canon of reality, but she finished her book, and having read it with my kids, I could say at least it was a satisfying ending. Hell, at least it was an ending. And this is where we need to start at the end of our story. Apparently, Dan and Dave know the ending of A Song of Ice and Fire, and one of these plot points was revealed that Brandon Stark would be sitting the Iron Throne, or, well, the new one that he made right here. And don't tell me, George, that you used The Boy Who Lived. Yes, I read the spoilers, but I was no less astonished on how bored I was watching them play out on the screen in front of me. The first 45 minutes of the episode was people looking very concerned and staring, not unlike they were doing last episode. Like we didn't get the point that a bunch of people died in a real bad way, got burned alive by a dragon. We have to have this point shoved in our face for another 15 full minutes. The episode starts with Tyrion walking by a bunch of burnt bodies with Jon behind him. He sees a northerner crying, which is foreshadowing for the rest of this episode and the fan base on the 8 years they wasted of their life. So, Jon and Tyrion split up. Jon finds Grey Worm executing Lannister soldiers who surrendered on the Queen's orders. Jon says, "Don't do it." Davos says, "Maybe you should talk to the Queen." Jon says, "Okay," because Jon can't think for himself anymore, and Grey Worm continues to execute Lannisters. In the meantime, we follow Tyrion walking through the burnt-out Red Keep. We had to have this long, drawn-out scene to confirm to the audience that Cersei and Jaime were dead, because many suspected they could have been alive, but I guess they could have if they had just walked 5 feet to the left, because there's a lot of open space there. Tyrion cries, and we are 14 minutes and 9 seconds into the final episode of Game of Thrones ever, and absolutely nothing has happened. We see Arya, who is doing exactly what Jon is doing, walking around looking very concerned, and she probably should, considering she stole her brother's story arc. Jon continues to look concerned, so does Arya, and then Drogon flies over. Then the Mad Queen arrives to give her dictator speech, because this character arc has been so believable, considering it's happened over about 90 minutes of screen time. 4 questions. Who made this banner? Who carried this banner? Who hung up this banner? And who the hell can hear Daenerys from that far away? In her dictator speech, she announces she's going to start conquering the world. She will start at Lannisport and go all the way to the Jade Sea. Tyrion looks concerned, then he quits as Hand, throwing his Hand of the King badge like Ned Stark did. That's a Season 1 reference. And he is taken prisoner. Jon looks more concerned. It is my belief that somewhere in Season 7, Jon took a massive head injury, because in Season 8, he's only had 2 lines. "I don't want it, and you're McQueen." Arya shows up out of nowhere, looking very concerned, and then tells Jon that he probably needs to kill the Queen. Remember when Game of Thrones used to be original and it wouldn't be the kind of show that would allow itself to fall victim of current year politics invading its show? Well, doing a fascist dictator speech, especially one that looks a lot like the one from Force Awakens, is very basic and very current year. I really can't see George having it go down like this. And then Jon visits Tyrion in his cell, and this is the absolute most infuriating scene in the entirety of the series because it lasts 10 minutes. 10 minutes of contrived conversation. We all know what's going to happen, and we're just slowly being led there when you tell us, creators, that you've run out of material, you've run out of time. No character background of the Night King, no background of the Children of the Forest, unresolved storylines that more than I can count right now, but we have 10 minutes to talk about things we know are going to happen. We recap the past like I'm recapping this episode. Jon then contradicts himself within this conversation, saying that he wouldn't justify what Daenerys did, but 2 sentences later, he's justifying what she does. I have it on very good authority that this is an actual picture of the season 8 writing session with Dan and Dave. So far this episode, Jon has needed advice from Davos, needed advice from his little sister, and needed advice from Tyrion. I remind you that this is the King of the North. I remind you this is the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. I remind you that this is the one true heir of the Iron Throne. He has commanded men, fought battles, fought the others, screamed at dragons. And what has he done in season 8? You're my queen, I don't want it. And what does he do in this episode? He cries. For a story based on the source material by a writer who thinks storytelling is the most important and powerful thing in the world, giving your main character such a contrived story is very suspicious at this point. And I'm just going to come out and say it. While I certainly think Jon Snow will do what he is about to do in the books, it won't lead up like this. We won't have a mopey crying Jon Snow for 2 books if he's even alive. I think he is a victim of the Time's Up era and current year politics. Thanks a lot, Dan and Dave, for ruining one of America's, one of the world's favorite characters, men, women alike. So after that 10-minute scene, Jon goes and kills Daenerys. He tells her, "You're my queen," then stabs her. She doesn't say anything. It's on an awful set. Daenerys doesn't get to sit down on the Iron Throne, and I half expected David Coverdale to come out singing "Fool for Your Lovin' No More." Then, for some reason, Drogon melts the Iron Throne because he is intelligent at this point. Now, George has always been kind of vague about that, but I guess he's intelligent. Then he picks up Daenerys and flies her away, and we never see her again. Fade to black. Daenerys is dead, and they spent all of 3 episodes setting up the Mad Queen and her death. This from a show that spent 2.5 years setting up the Red Wedding. This from a show that spent 3 years setting up the Boltons. This from a show that spent 7.5 years setting up the Night King. And just a reminder, the Night King has been referenced all of twice since they defeated him. Now, if you like this stuff, that's great. No judgment on you, but you can't tell me it's good. This is the biggest collapse of a television show of all time. That was good. This will go in the history books. This will never be forgotten. This is Dan and Dave's legacy forever because they wanted the rush to ending to get to Star Wars. And you have millions of pissed off fans. And it's been said in the live stream that I did with Dictator Van Doomcock, this is the normies' Last Jedi. Now, how does it feel, normies? And I do want to bring up Graham Strauss's tweet that I brought up in my previous video one more time because it was that good. By the way, follow our friend Graham Strauss, a great member of the Fandom Menace. The thing about the Game of Thrones backlash is that this time the normies are just as invested in the show's collapse. Unlike Star Wars, Trek, Doctor Who, and to some degree, the MCU. Game of Thrones was always aimed at the normies. Now they know what it's like to bleed. Well said, my friend. There are many moments in this series going all the way back to season 5 where this show just collapsed in its storytelling. But after it fades to black when Daenerys flies away, logic is completely thrown out the window. They just hurry up and finish the script. And by the way, once again, here is an image of the season 8 writing session with Dan and Dave. and they just want to finish this thing. I think they wrote it on some sticky notes. Boats and hoes, D&D, boats and hoes. Tyrion is alive. Why? I do not know, and apparently so is Jon Snow. He is brought by Grey Worm before the King's Council, and we do find out there are other ladies and lords left alive in Westeros. Probably some with some full armies. Probably some that could have shown up to King's Landing to intimidate Cersei more to force her surrender, but, boats and hoes. Is this Howland Reed? Is this Howland Reed? Is this Howland Reed? Well, we don't know because none of the men really talk. How are the Dothraki and the Unsullied holding King's Landing? Now, I fully understand the Unsullied remaining loyal to the dead Daenerys Targaryen, but not the Dothraki. They have a completely different power system. The minute they found out that Khaleesi was dead, Jon is the Cal. But if they can't work that out, then they work it out between themselves. Then they would go throughout King's Landing doing what Dothraki do. Now, maybe Yara and the Prince of Dorne brought their armies who have pledged to Dany and are still loyal to Dany, so maybe they're keeping Sansa's army, which she mentioned is there, in check. But this is all assumptions and boats and hoes. There's a scene where the three women, Sansa, Yara, and Arya, threaten each other to show how badass they are, while all the men stay quiet, and it's Davos who stands up and says, "We need to find a better way." Tyrion is told to shut up, then he recreates Westeros' power structure by suggesting that the lords and ladies of Westeros choose the next king. They say, okay, and they let Tyrion continue after telling him to be quiet. Then Edmure Tully throws his hat in for the kingship, and of course he is shot down by Sansa and made to look like an idiot. A complete disrespect of this character. Edmure Tully, who, while bedding his wife during the Red Wedding, his entire family was getting slaughtered. Edmure Tully, who was forced by Jaime Lannister to betray his uncle the Blackfish in one of the worst crimes of this show, screwing up a book story. Edmure Tully, who was tortured and held prisoner by the Freys for years, is just brought back to be made a fool of by Sansa. For some reason, Grey Worm, who was earlier in the episode slaughtering Lannister soldiers who had surrendered on their knees, allows Tyrion to live. And Jon Snow, and allows him to keep talking and choosing the next government for Westeros while grinding his teeth. Tyrion continues the talk, and he refers back to those stories that bring everybody together. And this is why he chooses Bran the Broken, Brandon Stark, as king. And everybody except Sansa says okay to this. Jon Snow is not mentioned, even though he is the rightful heir to the throne and had seasons of buildup with R+L=J, because the Unsullied will not let him go. The respawned Unsullied and the respawned Dothraki. And of course, there's no mention of Gendry Baratheon, who has the best claim to the throne. And guess who else has a better claim to the throne than Brandon Stark? Edmure Tully. This I have a major problem with. Also, Sansa decides that the North is going to be autonomous, and everybody goes, okay. And this I have another major problem with. The Iron Islands and Dorne are the most rebellious of the Seven Kingdoms. They would absolutely announce their own autonomy as well. So now we have the Six Kingdoms, and none of the lords would allow a king from an autonomous kingdom to sit on the Iron Throne. Most of these lords and ladies did not fight the dead. Most of these lords and ladies have no idea what a green seer or a three-eyed raven is. They would not go for this. Plus, they should have made this decision earlier before they rebuilt King's Landing. Do you know how much it's going to cost to make King's Landing ADA compliant? And this is where we get to Jon Snow, who was forced to join the Night's Watch. Why is there a Night's Watch? I don't know. The wall is broken. The wildlings were gifted the gift, and they don't want to go north during the winter unless it's spring now, but I have no idea because the show hasn't told us. Also, the north is now autonomous. That is Sansa's territory. She could free her brother and end the Night's Watch if she wants to. Plus, Grey Worm has left. There's no reason for him to be there, but whatever, boats and hoes. We need to give Jon a happy ending. So Jon goes to the north, reunites with Ghost, and yes, he pets Ghost. The one good thing of the entire season, aside from Brienne getting knighted, is Jon finally petting Ghost. Well, if that's the one takeaway from the final season of the once greatest show on television, well, that's pretty bad. So, Jon gets his happy ending in the North. Sansa becomes Queen in the North. Arya becomes Arya the Explorer. Brandon the Broken has the worst King's Council I've ever seen, with Tyrion as his hand, Bronn as Master of Coin, Grand Maester Samwell, I don't know where he had time to go to school for that, but whatever, Brienne of Tarth as his Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. She fills out Jaime's book. And of course, Davos Seaworthy, Liam Cunningham. I'm glad all of these characters lived. I love these characters, and it was idiocy. Then they have the dumbest King's Council after they took time for Tyrion to have a funny little scene rearranging chairs, and I realize I wasted 8 years of my life. To sum things up, everything in this series had to go down the way it went down, so Brandon Stark could become king. Early on in the series, Jojen Reed did say Bran was the most important person in this story, and he was for a little while. Then they skipped an entire season with Bran and completely forgot about his storyline until the end. So we are left with assumptions and questions, and the only thing that I can confirm is Bran is a total dick. He allowed his brother to get screwed over. He allowed Dany to go crazy. He allowed Theon to charge to his death, among many other things, so he could become king. We were supposed to believe that he is the best king because he is the three-eyed raven. Why? He tells us he could warg into Drogon at the end. What a dick! Believe it or not, I actually get this ending, partially because I read the books and watch a lot of videos and know that George R. R. Martin is very anti-war, so he wouldn't want to tell a story where a giant war where the realm unites against the dead makes the realm better. He doesn't want to show war improving anything. He wants to show that war is war, and it's terrible. So yes, the realm is broken. It is worse off than it was before, worse off than it was with Robert Baratheon. All hail Robert Baratheon, first of his name. The moral to this tale is nothing really changes, except the best way to stop war is to stop fighting, but people really aren't going to change because of nihilism, postmodernism, yay, subverted expectations, and an annoying, disappointing, unsatisfying ending. It wasn't, as Sam stated at the very end, a song of ice and fire. It was a song of stuff and things. But some good can come out of this. We can look at Game of Thrones as the long night of pop culture, a necessary battle that decimated many but strengthened our numbers here in the Fandom Menace because we've gotten a lot of normies on board and they know how it feels. And that petition is just the beginning. It's great. It's a movement. No, we don't expect for the series to be remade, but it's well over 1 million signatures. The point has gotten across to HBO and it's gotten across to the actors, but you need to do one more thing. The petition won't be enough. You need to unsubscribe from HBO because that is the only way they will feel it. And many of you have, and you have emailed me. Thank you so much, and I have as well. I have unsubscribed to HBO after I did this video. Now, this will not be my last Game of Thrones video. There is a question of how or why did this happen, and why has the show fell off for the last few years? Well, there is an answer to that question, and that will be a video coming out this week. Please like, share, and subscribe. Go to nerdrotic.com for my live stream schedule. I will link the description of the big long live stream I did with Dictator Van Doomcock. And everybody have a great day, and may the free folk sing songs of your greatness.
Nerdrotic.com. Please subscribe.